Right, you guys are good. You have the all clear. All losses at 4:59. Good luck, everyone. Have a good round.
Okay, are both sides ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready.
Okay, first let's hear your introductions with your team members.
Yes. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jabari McRae, and I'm joined today with my co-counsel, Davis Hummer.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Taylor Miller.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And together we represent the plaintiff in today's case, Joy Petrillo, on behalf of the estate of Genesis Petrillo. Would you like introductions from the defense before we proceed with pretrial, Your Honor?
Yes. What's your team number, plaintiff?
1913.
Thank you. Okay, defense, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, Your Honor, good afternoon. My name is Dalton Davis, and I, along with my co-counsel, Randall Shirey, and Michelle Deutsch, we represent the defense, the estate of Peony Estates in today's case. And Your Honor, our team number, I believe, is 1063.
Okay, introductions having been completed, do we have any pretrial matters to attend to?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to share my screen to display the pretrial motion and stipulations?
You may. Do I need to do something to make that happen?
No, you do not. I think I have it all set. All right, Your Honor. Originally, there were two claims the defendant moved for summary judgment on, and the defendant's motion for summary judgment on the plaintiff's negligence per se claim against Peony Estates was denied, and today's evidence is limited to that claim, to which the defendant has not made us aware of any affirmative defenses. Additionally, both parties have agreed to bifurcate trials to where we aren't seeking damages today. The plaintiff's burden only relates to liability, specifically vicarious liability, to where all actions and omissions of Harper Martini and all other employees are imputed to Peony Estates. Also, if I can direct your attention to the stipulations, specifically stipulations 1, 3, and 4, that states all exhibits are pre-numbered and exhibits 1 through 11 have been pre-admitted and can be used at any time. Last, Your Honor, we'd like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all non-party witnesses, and the plaintiff does not have a party representative in today's case. And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Okay, sounds good. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, Your Honor. And before the opposing counsel takes the pretrial motion for summary judgment down, would the opposing counsel mind going back to that motion for summary judgment on their screen? Your Honor, the defense would just like to direct the court's attention that intent is not an element of the crime in today's case, as Judge Galuza held in the previous pretrial hearing. Additionally, Your Honor, looking to the case law on page 1, we would also like to direct the court's attention to the case of Bessman versus Priskel, which essentially outlines that intent, again, is not an element of the crime, or of the tort, excuse me, in today's case.
Okay. Anything else?
No, Your Honor, other than just that during the course of the trial, we would request permission for our timekeeper to use the chat function on Zoom so that we can clearly see our time.
I have no problem with that.
And Your Honor, with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, plaintiff, are you also ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to opening statements.
The plaintiff proceed with opening statements, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
May it please
And I'm sorry, pause. Before you begin, if at any time I'm doing something wrong as the presiding judge with respect to the camera and the view, please don't hesitate to let me know. This is my first time doing this on the Zoom. So sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No worries. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yeah.
May it please the court. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon, members of the jury. Cutting costs leads to lives lost. Genesis Petrillo was someone's child. Genesis Petrillo was someone's fiance. Genesis Petrillo was, but is no longer, all because Peony Estates cut corners on safety precautions to save a buck. Today you will hear the multiple times Peony Estates valued cost over safety. The multiple times Peony Estates valued cost over lives. Genesis Petrillo is no longer here because the business decided that saving a couple grand is more important than the safety of their customers. My counsel and I are here on behalf of Genesis Petrillo's brother, Joey Petrillo, the administrator of Genesis Petrillo's estate. Now, our job as plaintiff is to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, that the defendant violated the pesticide statute and that the violation of that statute led to the death of Genesis Petrillo. Midland's Code 12100 was created so that people don't die. Yet Genesis died because that code was violated by Peony Estates. I remind you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that our job is to prove that it is more likely than not Genesis Petrillo died because Peony Estates failed to follow the proper safety codes. More likely than not, even if it is just 1% more likely. We have done our jobs today. Today you will hear from Lonnie Paris, a well-credited investigative journalist. Lonnie investigated Peony Estates wine production area and will testify to the poor conditions of that area. Next, you will hear from one of the top FDA inspectors, Riley Adams O'Keefe. Ms. O'Keefe will testify to the Peony Estates' multiple safety violations. And finally, you will hear from Dr. Jim Kwan, the heroic doctor who treated Genesis and tried to save their life. Dr. Kwan will testify that the source of Genesis's poison was from the Carroll wine produced by Peony Estates. And because of Peony Estates' recklessness, a newlywed couple will never get to go on their honeymoon. The family that Genesis Petrillo left behind will never be able to hear or hold Genesis again. Cutting costs leads to lives lost. Therefore, we ask for only a verdict consistent with the facts, a verdict finding Peony Estates liable. Thank you.
Okay, defense, do you have an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
You may proceed.
May it please the court, counsel, and members of the jury. This case is about an accident that turned out to be fatal. Tragedies happen all the time. Some would call them accidents, whether it was accidentally running a red light, saying something unkind to a loved one, or waking up late for work. Accidents happen. And on the night of the rehearsal dinner, there was a fatal one that no one saw coming or could have prevented, especially Peony Estates. This was a terrible accident that tore apart a loving family and nothing more. Good afternoon. My name is Randall Shirey, and I, along with my co-counsel Dalton Davis and Michelle Deutsch, are here on behalf of the defendant, the Peony Estates. Now, in today's case, the prosecution bears the burden of proof. They must prove to you through a preponderance of the evidence that Peony Estates is liable for negligence per se. That burden sits solely at the table of the plaintiff. They must prove to you two things. First, that Peony Estates violated the statute, and second, that the violation of the statute was the direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. Essentially, they must prove to you, the jury, that this accident was actually a negligent violation of a statute performed by Peony Estates. We, the defense, have no burden. We do not have to show anything. But throughout the course of today's case, we, the defense, will present evidence that points to the fact that this tragedy was simply nothing more than an accident, one that cost Genesis Petrillo their life. If the prosecution does not prove to you through a preponderance of the evidence that Peony Estates is liable for negligence, you must side with the defense in agreeing that this was nothing more than a tragic, unavoidable accident. First, I'd like to tell you about what happened before Genesis Petrillo tragically passed away. The night of June 7th, 2019 was supposed to be a precursor to the day that this family had planned for so long, but it ended up being the worst day anyone involved could have imagined. A soon-to-be husband and beloved friend spent the day surrounded by family, friends, and his soon-to-be wife, Casey Soto. After months of planning, budgeting, and invitations, their big day was finally coming true, and Peonia Estates was happy to host it for them. Peonia Estates ensured that they would provide the guests of this wedding with the safest and most reliable event possible. This goal was accomplished, and the rehearsal dinner led into the evening as a massive success. But things didn't stay that way. Tragedy struck that night, and Genesis Petrillo was taken from his loved ones before his new life could even start. But it was not because of a violation of a state safety statute that the plaintiff will attempt to lead you to believe, but rather a tragic, unavoidable accident. During the course of today's trial, I urge the jury to pay attention to the common denominator of today's case, shown through the testimony of 3 witnesses. The fact that Peonia Estates valued its business, but they valued the safety of their customers more. Every witness that comes to you today to testify in this trial will tell you a lot about what they saw, but I want you to pay attention to what they didn't see. There will be not one witness to come before you today that will testify that they saw anything to implicate Peonia Estates of negligence. First, you'll hear from Austin Lewis, the chief production manager for wine at Peonia Estates. He will tell you about the practices he ensured were followed so that customers of Peonia Estates would enjoy fantastic wine, but also that they would be safe while enjoying it. Second, you'll hear from Dr. Cannon, who will tell you about the inconsistencies she found in the report of Dr. Kwan and how there were several variables left unaccounted for in Dr. Kwan's report that could have explained this tragedy outside of the conclusion Dr. Kwan arrived at. And lastly, you'll hear from Casey Soto, the late partner of Genesis Petrillo, about what she saw, but more importantly, what she did not see at her time at Peonia Estates. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Dalton Davis will come before you and review all of the evidence with you in his closing argument. And when you consider all of the facts in today's case, the evidence will show, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this was an unavoidable accident and nothing more. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel will ask you to do the right thing and find Peonia Estates not liable for negligence, but rather that this was a tragic, unavoidable accident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Plaintiff, are you ready to give a witness you would like to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Inspector Riley Adkins O'Keefe to the stand.
Okay, witness may take a stand. Hi.
Good afternoon, Ms. Riley Adkins O'Keefe. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Riley Atkins O'Keefe.
Tell us, what do you do? What are your credentials?
Well, I make you safe. I make sure that businesses are following safety procedures, that they're not poisonous, hazardous items are being consumed by customers. I just make sure there's a cleanly procedures going on throughout the business.
And how long have you been doing this?
Well, I started in 2013. It's about to be almost a decade now. I conducted almost 170 inspections.
And what brings you here today?
Well, I'm here to let you guys know about all the times that I went to Peonia Estates.
And how many times total did you inspect Peonia Estates?
Too many times, about 3.
Let's start at the beginning with the first inspection. When was it?
November 5th of 2015.
Did you observe anything noteworthy during this inspection?
No violations were found, but I did reprimand Harper Martini that I found an issue with the storage of pesticides. It was way too close to the wine production area. Well, pesticides are very dangerous, as we all know, and they need to be stored properly. So they need to be at least 50 feet away from any food or beverage, anything that produces anything of that nature, just so contamination will not happen. We do not want any customers getting sick.
When was the next inspection?
I remember this one. This one was about, I believe, July 12th of 2018. It was very unique.
What prompted this visit?
We received an anonymous tip. This tip was sent over, a letter was sent over to the DHES on July 10th. of 2018. And they told us that there was an ongoing issue with some pests in the wine cellar, and that they had an issue with the
Objection,
petitional.
Your Honor, hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
This is not hearsay because it's not for the matter asserted. It's not for the truth asserted. This is just the background. This is foundation.
Foundation for what?
Foundation that prompted the next visit.
Okay, defense, how do you respond?
Your Honor, this statement is being offered for the truth of the matter. Asserted that there was a health code violation.
Okay, Ms. Miller, what is the statement?
It's in reference to a note that they received, a letter saying that there was a health code violation that prompted their following visit on July 12th.
Are you talking about statements contained in the letter or just the fact that the letter was received?
No, ma'am, just the fact that the letter was received.
Okay, for now, the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. So let's go on about this inspection. Tell us about it. Did you find anything?
Well, for this inspection, the main thing that I found was it was the same thing as last time. Back in 2015, there was still an issue with the storage of pesticides. I really didn't understand why they didn't understand that cannot be in that area. I noticed various amount of pests, beetles, mites, all around the wine barrels. And just as much as there were, that prompted me to follow my procedure as an FDA agent to go ahead and collect some samples, which as a procedure, we have to take about 20% of each barrel that is presented and send it off to the lab for testing, because that is basically a potential health violation.
I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 3. Your Honor, pursuant to Stipulation 3, Exhibit 3 has been pre-admitted.
Okay,
Mr. Hallmark, would you mind sharing your screen with? Thank you. What is Exhibit 3, Inspector O'Keefe?
Exhibit 3 is the wine barrels that I collected my samples from.
And you mentioned that lab tests were run on these samples?
Yes, a lab was sent out for these wine samples that I collected.
And did the labs come back with any significant findings?
From the lab results, they just concluded what I thought, is that there will be a high amount of insophisos contaminated around that area, and basically that is another pest. That is a pesticide, which is an issue.
I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 9. Your Honor, pursuant to Stipulation 3, Exhibit 9 has also been pre-admitted. Will you explain for what Exhibit 9 is?
Exhibit 9 is the lab results that basically told me that the insophisos was at a very high level of contamination.
Let's move on for the lab results for now. Did you observe anything else during this inspection?
Well, during this inspection, I also had a weird encounter with Miss Martini. She was very rude, honestly. It wasn't a pleasant conversation. She wasn't making eye contact with me. She told me there was a tour group going on at the time. She seemed very nervous. I wasn't sure why there would be a tour group going on at the time, considering that my inspection was being done. But come to find out, there was no tour group at all. So I guess she just wanted to basically postpone it, but I had to ignore her request because as an FDA agent, we cannot do that.
Did you speak with any of Martini's employees during this inspection?
I spoke with Austin Lewis, the head winemaker.
And what did you learn from this conversation with Lewis?
Well, basically that the procedure that Miss Martini told me was not the same. Nothing correlated. It did not match up. The employees were storing the pesticides really, really close to the facility, and that is not okay. And they use it as a convenience purpose, which again is a very potential health hazard, and that is something that cannot be tolerated.
Following this conversation with Lewis, did you at any point return for a follow-up inspection?
I returned again on May 8th of 2019.
Tell us about this inspection, please.
Well, this one was disgusting because I found 4 violations.
And what were those 4 violations?
Well, the first one was about three containers of pesticides in a bottling area. The second one was the floor drainage system. It wasn't functioning properly. I found dirt and debris, and which likely caused the backup, which that's not sanitary. That's disgusting. The third one that I found was, well, basically this was just a conversation between the employees. This is very confusing to me because they didn't understand the spraying procedure of the pesticides, which is very weird considering that they work there. I don't understand why they don't know why they don't understand the spraying procedure for the pesticides. And the fourth one would be the bottle of Carl wine that I seen next to a canister of pesticides. I told Kirby Doolittle that this needs to be disposed of, and it could be very hazardous to people, and it needs to be out of this facility immediately.
I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 2A and 2B. Pursuant to Stipulation 3, 2A and 2B have also been pre-admitted, Your Honor. What is Exhibit 2A and B?
Well, 2A is the wine bottle that I seen on the shelf next to the canister of pesticides, and I believe 2B is the label that was wrapped around the bottle the last time I saw it.
Let's go back to the bottle of Carl wine you saw. What does it say to you that it was next to a canister of pesticide?
That Pannonia Estates was not following the building codes of Midland law, that they are just being completely negligent and not understanding that this is something that needs to be very, very concise, considering that you are running a business that you're allowing customers to come into. As the statute states, 12-11 section 2.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response.
Which part is hearsay, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, the statute itself is hearsay. Riley Adkins O'Keefe's knowledge of the statute would annotate hearsay within this.
Ms. Miller, do you have a response to the hearsay objection?
Yes, it falls under the hearsay exception since it's public knowledge. A statute is a federal regulation. She has to know as a FDA agent.
Okay, defense, last word.
Your Honor, this statement or the knowledge of the statute is still being offered for the truth of the matter asserted and is therefore hearsay by O'Keefe knowing of this statute.
Do you dispute the version of the statute that's going to be provided, that is not actually the statute?
No, Your Honor, not necessarily, but simply the knowledge of the statute itself is hearsay.
Okay, I'm overrule the hearsay objection, and I think I'll just take judicial notice for now of that fact, trusting that that is in fact the statute as it's written, but feel free to raise an objection later on. For now, it's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. With all these continuing violations, did you reprimand Peony Estates in any way?
Well, based on my last inspection where I found all those disgusting violations, I placed them on a probationary period to make sure that they fixed that issue. They were headed to being shut down. But considering that as an FDA agent, we have to follow specific protocol and procedure, I could not just automatically shut them down. So I placed them on a probationary period.
Did you ever see Peony Estates properly store pesticides?
Starting from 2015, no. I never seen them properly store pesticides at all.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-exam.
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. O'Keefe, I just wanted to make sure you can hear me and see me clearly.
Yes.
Hi, Mr. O'Keefe, you're an FDA inspector, correct?
Yes.
And it's your job to find out what's actually going on in the business.
It's my job to find out what's going on in the business and to make sure everyone is safe.
And specifically, you look for code violations.
Specifically, yes.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about your inspection of Peony Estates in May of 2018. Specifically, after speaking with Austin Lewis, you didn't find any code violations with the way that Peony Estates was storing their pesticides, correct?
No, nothing that would prompt us to consider it a violation, but there were some issues. I will say that.
In fact, with the way that they were storing their pesticides, it was so far away from the bottling area that you thought that maybe the employees, out of convenience, would store it closer.
I'm sorry, say your question again.
After speaking with Austin Lewis in May of 2018, you found that the pesticides were stored so far away from the bottling area that it was an inconvenience to the employees.
Yes, that will be the reason that Austin Lewis told me that they were storing them closer to the facility for convenience purpose. But either way, that's not safe. That's not proper procedure.
And in regards to the recommendations you had made to Peony Estates in regards to their pesticide storage, after you made these recommendations, you improved their storage methods after this visit where you talked with Martini.
I'm sorry, what visit are you referring to?
The final visit.
The final visit? Can you please restate your question?
Yeah, so after you had suggested different storage methods of the pesticides, Peony Estates took these into account and properly stored pesticides, correct?
Not from my knowledge. I don't remember.
Specifically in May of 2018, you didn't find any code violations with the way they were storing their pesticides.
No, because no violations were given based off of FDA standards, but there were issues that I did reprimand Ms. Martini on.
And moving past this inspection, I want to kind of switch up gears a little bit. So you weren't there the night of the rehearsal dinner, were you?
No, I was not.
And you were not aware of the storage practices of the pesticides on that night?
I can only go off what I was told and what I seen.
In fact, you have no idea how Genesis could have passed away, do you?
No, but considering that there is a bunch of issue with the stores of pesticides, I would think that will be a prompted issue.
Just to clarify my question, you're not certain that there was a storage of pesticide issue on the night that Genesis Petrillo died?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. May I be heard?
Sure.
Opposing counsel is asking Inspector O'Keefe to speculate on to what Peony Estates was doing on the night of Genesis Petrillo's death. She would have no knowledge of this, and he's calling for speculation.
I think that's his point, Counselor. I'm going to overrule your objection. You can go ahead and re-ask the question.
Thank you. Specifically, Ms. O'Keefe, you weren't there the night that the rehearsal dinner happened, and in fact, you don't know how Genesis could have died.
No, because that's out of my scope of knowledge, but I do know that there was an issue of storage and pesticides in the Peony Estates area. This has been going on since 2015.
Specifically, an issue of storage with the pesticides that you made recommendations towards and were not aware of happening on the night of the rehearsal dinner.
No, because that is out of my scope of knowledge. I was not there on the night of Genesis Petrillo's death. But what I can tell you is that there was an issue with the storage of pesticides. I found 4 violations on May 8th of 2019, and just the fact that they were being very negligent with the proper protocols that should be taken.
And just for clarification within the court, you found these violations a year before the death of Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, I did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect?
Not at this time, Your Honor. We just ask that the witness be excused.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Keefe. And plaintiff, you may call your next witness if you are ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Lonnie Paris to the stand. May we proceed?
You may.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, my name is Lonnie Paris. Some say Pars, Perez, but it's Paris.
How are you doing today, Ms. Paris?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Now, could you please tell us what you do for a living?
Of course. I am an investigative journalist.
What brings you here today? Excuse me, can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Ms. Paris, is your connection okay?
I think it's lagging a bit. I'm so sorry about that. Could you repeat your question?
The defense would request that we pause the time so that Ms. Abdul may refresh the page and try to improve the connection.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's good now.
Okay, let's move on then.
Okay. What brings you here today, Ms. Paris?
I actually investigated and I wrote an article about Peonia Estates.
What prompted this investigation?
Well, I had received a tip from the owner of Rosie and Pedro and competitor, Danny Francasio.
What did this tip say?
It basically said that Peonia Estates may have had a pesticide issue.
So you
And I
wanted to
had to go
investigate to see if it
investigate.
was true. What did
Of
you do with
course,
this?
I can't just speculate.
What did you do with this information?
Well, I went ahead and I went to visit Peonia Estates.
Let's talk about your visit to Peonia Estates. When did you first go?
I first headed there around July 13th of 2018 in the summer.
What did you find on that first visit?
Well, I looked around the public area and there wasn't really much information for me to get. But I did know that Peonia Estates have these like guided tours, and they had one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I decided to sign up for one and to check out the estate.
When you went on a guided tour, what did you see? What did you learn?
Well, I went on July 16th of 2018. I learned about, the winemaking process, everything about the estate, but there wasn't really that much interesting for my investigative job that I had to take matters in my own hands, and I ended up sneaking into the employees' back room. This led me to the bottling area where I saw pesticide bottles just scattered everywhere.
What brand of pesticide did you see?
It was the Bug Off pesticide brand.
Did you see anything else other than bug off pesticide bottles scattered throughout the bottling area?
Yes. So seeing that, as an investigative journalist, it made me so curious. I ended up heading into Harper Martini's room, and that's where I saw a memo from the head winemaker, an employee at the estate, Austin Lewis.
Would you recognize that memo if I showed it to you today?
Of course.
Ms. Paris, what is this memo? Or do you recognize this exhibit, rather?
This is, yes, I sure do. This was the memo from the head winemaker that I had found on Harper Martini's desk in her office.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of what you saw?
Yes, it's the exact same note.
Has this been altered in any way?
No, I do not believe it has.
Your Honor, a plaintiff offers Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 12 is admitted.
Ms. Paris, who wrote this memo?
I believe it was Austin Lewis, who is the head winemaker at Peonia Estates.
Who was the memo sent out to?
It was sent out to all the employees at Peonia Estate.
What is the subject of this memo?
It is entitled Pesticide Usage.
And when was it sent out?
It was sent out on July 1st of 2018,
Could you please read the first half
a
of the
few
second
weeks before
paragraph
I
aloud?
went to visit Peonia Estate.
Could you please read the first part of the second paragraph of this memo aloud, please?
Of course. Of course. It states, we need each and every one of you to prepare the entirety of Peonia Estates for an imminent pesticide spraying. We need to do this quickly and cheaply. Nothing else matters.
Thank you. Can everybody see me okay? Now, I would like to go back to the actual tour, Ms. Paris. Did you learn anything on that tour?
Of course. Yes, the tour guide, Drew Matsokas, he let me know that Peonia Estates only produces a wine that takes a year to harvest, meaning that if they use 2018 grapes, that the wine connected directly to that grapes would be the 2019 version of the wine. That's when I decided I have to postpone my investigations.
Did you visit the estate? Or actually, no, let me back up. Why did you decide to postpone your investigation?
Well, like I said, since the grapes from 2018 won't be harvested and used as wine of the 2019 batch, no one would be impacted, nor can they detect any pesticides in the wine. In the meantime, however, I did read up on the health codes, background information, and still went on tours on Peonia Estates.
During these intermittent visits, did you see anything interesting at Peonia Estates? Ms. Paris?
Sorry, I think it lagged a bit. Can you repeat your question?
I had asked you if you saw anything interesting during these visits to Peonia Estates.
Yes, I sure did. On May 8th, one of my visits, I did see the 2019 Cara bottle wine, and it was so beautiful looking, and it was actually sat right by the bottling shelf.
Would like to move to the night of the rehearsal dinner. That's June 7th, 2019. Now, you investigated
Yes.
the estates that night, right?
I sure did.
Where did you go?
I went to the back room, and that's where I again saw the 2019 Cara bottle wine sitting by itself.
Is there anything else?
Yes. Well, this was the moment that I had made my big discovery. Right next to the bottling station, I saw bottles of empty pesticide, the Bug Off brand. And that was very concerning.
Now, I'm about to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 11. This has been pre-admitted as per Stipulation 4. Ms. Paris, do you recognize this?
Yes, so this is the sample results that I got. Like I said, just because the pesticide was right next to the wine it's still a speculation. So I had to take a sample of the wine and send it in for evidence, basically.
What were the results of these tests?
The results showed that the wine or the sample tested positive for pesticides.
I'm now showing you what has been pre-admitted as per Stipulation 3. This is Exhibit 2A and 2B. Do you recognize this bottle of wine?
Wine that I'd seen on May 8th and on different occasions as well.
You also saw this bottle on June 7th?
Yes, it is.
Just to clarify, where exactly did you see this bottle?
I saw it on the bottling shelf by itself.
And what did you see next to the bottle?
I saw these empty containers of the Bug Off pesticide.
And the pesticide and the bottle were located where?
They were in the bottling station in the back room of Peonia Estates.
Now, did you also go to the wedding reception? Excuse me, the word is leaving me. The night before the actual wedding. Were you there?
Yes, I did, the rehearsal.
Rehearsal.
I had headed there, and well, I did see Harper Martini with that same Cara bottle wine. He was actually handing it over to Genesis Petrillo, which I later figured out was his soon-to-be son-in-law.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, do we have a cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed.
Granted.
Good morning, Ms. Praz. Before we proceed, can you see and hear me? Good morning, Ms. Praz. I'd like to ask, before we proceed, can you hear and see me?
Yes, I can. Very well. Thank you.
Now, you were hoping that you would find something going on at Peonia Estates so that you would be able to be rehired as an investigative journalist. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Well, as any investigative journalist, I'd love to hit that story that, boosts my career. This investigative journalist lifestyle is very competitive.
Now, Ms. Praz, in addition to wanting to find dirt on Peonia Estates, part of the reason why you're testifying in today's case is that you hope to bring publicity to yourself, right?
Well, no, I don't really ask for publicity. I have been a freelance journalist for a while, and but for the most part, I've already gained a soon-to-be job from the story.
Now, Ms. Praz, I would like to talk to you about some other things in addition to why you're testifying here. Now, you talked about on direct how you went to Peonia Estates, right?
Correct. Several times.
And specifically while you were there, you walked around the vineyard, right?
Correct. I was on guided tours, and I also trailed off the tours.
So you're pretty familiar with Peonia Estates, correct?
Yes, I've been there a few times. I've looked at the map also, but again, it is such a big estate.
You're aware of the different bottling areas and everything that's going on generally in the vineyard, correct?
I'm quite familiar with a few estates, and I do know they have different bottling stations. But I did visit one in particular, and that's where I saw the pesticide containers lying down.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes, it is.
Now, Ms. Praz, I'd like to ask you about what you didn't see going on at the Peonia Estates. When you were walking around, you never actually saw them bottling the wine, did you?
No, because I had to investigate. I couldn't be, seen by other employees. Otherwise, I would not be able to get all the information I need. So I didn't see anything directly. I just saw the end result.
So you never saw what went into the wine bottles, right?
No, I'm not familiar.
And you were never around when they were putting the actual liquid into the bottles, correct?
Could you specify what liquid you mean?
Any sort of wine, you never saw the wine actually going into the bottles, is that correct?
No, I was not in the wine production area where they make and, produce the wines. I was only in the bottling station.
And so you don't know if and you also don't know if the pesticide was around when they were bottling the wine, do you?
No, I'm not sure. But again, I did see multiple empty cans of the pesticides around the bottling station, which was quite concerning.
You don't even know how they use the pesticide at Peonia Estates, do you?
Not essentially. I would hope they would use it for insects, to get rid of it. But because of the sample, it showed that, some of the pesticides were in the wine, unfortunately.
The insects outside of the vineyard, correct?
Around the swamp, and sometimes, insect infestation can really get into the estate. So I'm not really sure where they could have sprayed, maybe inside the estate as well.
And you do not know if the grapes were ever treated to get rid of the pesticide prior to being turned into wine, do you?
No, again, I'm not sure about that, but I do know that one of the wines did sample for pesticides,
Now, I'd like to ask you about one more thing you said on direct. Now, you said in the course of your investigation, you were looking for any instances of someone being poisoned at Peonia Estates.
Well, yes. Unfortunately, Genesis was the one to have had that. But I was trying to look for, again, an end result. And my end result in this case was supposed to be just the sample that I found.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Any redirect?
Redirect, Your Honor. It's asked the witness may stand down.
Okay, the witness may step down, and if plaintiff is ready to call its third witness, we can do that now.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand. Dr. Kwan, are you with us? Okay, great. Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
And Dr. Kwan, what do you do for a living?
For the past 5 years, I've been the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital in Midlands.
And where did you go to school?
Oh, I received my undergrad at Georgia Tech, my medical degree from UNC, and I did my residency and fellowship at Emory University.
And did you specialize in any particular field?
Oh, yes, I did. I specialized in emergency medicine and medical toxicology. As a boy, I was attached to my mother's hip, a true Southern mama's boy. I was with her the whole time she battled breast cancer, spending my childhood in the hospital. I was the hallway greeter, quickly learned a thing or two about bedside manner. While my mother did beat cancer and went into remission, she passed away when I was a teen, not due to the cancer, but from the complications of the toxins within chemotherapy. This is what started my passion for toxicology in all forms. I went into the field to save people because my mama wasn't able to be saved.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Now, for those of us who aren't too familiar, could you briefly describe and explain to us what exactly is toxicology?
It's the study of harmful effects of chemical substances on living organisms.
And what specific training do you have in your area of medicine?
I completed my residency in emergency medicine at Emory in 2001. 2 years later, I completed my fellowship in medical toxicology.
And what licenses and certifications do you have, Dr. Kwan?
Well, I've had a medical license for 17 years now. I'm certified in internal medicine, critical care, emergency medicine, and medical toxicology.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 20.
What is it?
It is Dr. Kwan's CV, and we will go through the proper steps to admit it into evidence.
Okay. Any objection, defense, to showing this before it's admitted?
Your Honor, we would just ask that constructively the jury not see this document until it is admitted into evidence. Obviously, with the technological restrictions, we can't physically prevent that, but constructively for today's case.
That sounds good. Go ahead.
Mr. Hummer, could you please display Exhibit 20? Dr. Kwan, can you identify this document before you?
Yes, it's the CV that I typed myself.
Is it a fair and accurate copy as you remember it to be?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 20 into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, we have no objections to the doctor's curriculum vitae being brought into evidence.
Exhibit 20 is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, according to this document, it states that you have a few published journals. Can you tell us about a few of those that relate to the work that you were asked to do in today's case, Dr. Kwan?
Yes, 5 relate to today's case, 1 on testing delays, 2 on poisons and pesticides, and 2 on the diagnostic process that goes into these cases.
And can you please describe your duties currently as Chief Emergency Physician at River Valley?
Yes, my duties include diagnosing and treating patients who enter the ER, especially those exposed to toxins. I also manage a team of nurses and physicians in the ER.
Now, what brings you here today?
Well, on June 7th, 2019, Genesis Petrillo was admitted to the emergency room where I was the physician in charge. That evening, I treated Petrillo's symptoms and diagnosed the illness. I was asked to prepare a report offering a conclusion about Petrillo's illness and symptoms and how they were caused.
Well, before we get into those conclusions, could you please briefly describe to the court the events that you witnessed on that evening?
When I first encountered Petrillo, Petrillo was vomiting and non-responsive, smelled of wine, and appeared to be intoxicated, showing signs consistent with alcohol poisoning. From this, I conducted a full examination.
And what did that examination entail?
Samples of blood, vomit, and examined the systems and vitals.
Now, when you conducted this examination, can you explain to us what did you observe?
I observed symptoms that made you believe Petrillo was experiencing or exposed to something other than alcohol. Petrillo's excessive tearing, contracted pupils, and rapid pulse were all inconsistent with alcohol poisoning.
And what did that tell you?
To be specific, Genesis's pupils showed me that he may have been exposed to a particular toxin called organophosphate. This led me to ordering a full panel of poison and toxis analysis.
Now, what are some of the ways one can become poisoned by organophosphate?
There are three: inhalation, absorption through the skin, or ingestion. Genesis showed no sign of inhalation or absorption, so I concluded that it was through ingestion.
And what did you do next?
I administered an antidote to Petrillo because he was on the verge of death.
Now, earlier you mentioned that you ordered samples of Genesis' blood and vomit. Can you explain to the court the tests that were performed on these samples?
Yes, we conducted two tests: the blood and the stomach contents.
And did you have sufficient facts and data to perform these tests?
Yes, very much so.
And were the methods used to conduct these tests relied upon by other professionals in your field?
Yes.
And did you reliably apply those methods to the facts in today's case?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Kwan, I want to talk about each of those tests separately. First, I want to begin with the toxicology screening. Tell us, what exactly is that?
A toxicology screening is screening for toxic substances. It's an analysis of blood, whether or not it was presence of toxins.
And what did the analysis for Genesis show?
It showed that Genesis had a blood alcohol of 0.16, which confirmed that Genesis had been drinking.
Explain to us exactly how important alcohol levels are and how they played a role in your examination.
I prepared a chart that can best help understand that concept.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 23. I have no objection to not letting the jury see it before we get it admitted into evidence.
Okay. Any objection from defense?
Not to it being shown to the witness and Your Honor. No.
Okay, great.
Can you identify the document before you?
Yes, it's the alcohol impairment chart I wrote to explain Genesis's blood alcohol level.
And is it a fair and accurate copy as you remember it to be?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 23 into evidence.
Okay, any objection?
No, Your Honor. We ask this exhibit be entered into evidence, please.
Okay, Exhibit 23 is admitted. Please continue.
Dr. Kwan, can you please explain to us the relevance of alcohol content levels as they relate to the work that you did today?
Yes, blood alcohol content, also known as BAC, Genesis's was a 0.16, which did not put him at the risk of death. He would need at least a 0.30 BAC to be at risk of death.
How likely did alcohol play a role in causing the symptoms you observed?
Highly unlikely. As you can see from the chart, his BAC was a 0.16. That is too far from the risk of death.
What else did this analysis show?
The blood test results confirmed that Petrillo had extremely low acetylchloroethane levels. This can be a direct indication of exposure to organophosphate. The second test was a toxin screen to confirm the actual presence of the pesticide.
Now, did this test confirm this exposure to the pesticide?
The second test was an unknown poison screening. We tested his system for the presence of pesticide.
And did it confirm the exposure to the pesticide?
Definitely. It confirmed that the poison organophosphate pesticide was indeed found in the blood. As I stated, any suspected ingestion of this poison can be fatal.
Were you able to confirm how this poison got into Genesis' system?
Yes, as a toxicologist, we try to isolate all the poison sources and variables. In the screening test, the poison was present in Petrillo's stomach. Furthermore, we tested the contents of the stomach, which were the vomit and the presence of wine, to confirm that there was presence of the organophosphate in the stomach.
At this point, did you have sufficient facts and data to create your report?
Yes.
And were the methods used to form your conclusion relied upon and accepted by those in your field?
Oh, definitely.
Can you explain to us, what did Genesis Petrillo ingest that contained this poison?
Genesis's vomit did contain the presence of the poisonous pesticide, but the food found in the stomach did not contain the pesticide. Furthermore, the vomit contained both food and wine, meaning that one can conclude that the pesticide was found in the wine and not the food.
And did you consider any other alternatives as to what Genesis could have possibly ingested that contained this poison?
No.
Did you consider any alternatives as to what he might have ingested?
We successfully confirmed that the food Genesis ate was not exposed to the wine. To the pesticide, and it was only the wine.
And can you, how likely is it that Genesis died of alcohol poisoning?
Not very likely. A 0.16, I mean, it's just not very likely to have been.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any other reason Genesis would experience these symptoms?
No, the symptoms were consistent with the diagnosis of organophosphate poisoning. I believe the pesticides and the alcohol, and not the alcohol, is what caused the symptoms, ultimately leading to the fatal death. Again, we tested the food. This makes it even more impossible that anything other than the wine possessed the poison. And when Genesis ingested the wine, he ingested the poison, causing respiratory failure and ultimately Genesis's death.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, I would request to know how much time is still available for cross-examination from the timekeeper.
Okay, timekeeper, do we know?
In the group chat, Your Honor.
6:17, okay?
And Dr. Kwan, before I begin, can you see and hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, now I'd like to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about your experience as a physician. You are currently the chief medical officer, essentially as a chief medical physician at the River Valley Hospital ER, correct?
Correct.
But in addition to your role as a physician, you actually work for a nonprofit, right?
Yes.
You're actually on the board of directors for Doctors for Organic Solutions, right?
Yes, indeed.
And this is a group that is an advocacy group that fights against the use of chemical pesticide, right?
Yes.
Chemical pesticides like the one Genesis Petrillo died from.
Not necessarily, just all kinds of pesticides.
Right, but organophosphate pesticide is a type of chemical pesticide, correct?
Correct, however, there are hundreds.
Right, but that is one of the pesticides this group fights against, correct?
Yes, one of the hundreds.
In fact, you hope this case will serve as a wake-up call for legislators in the state of Midlands, right?
I only thought about that possibility after the fact. And of course, it would be an added bonus that would save many lives and could have possibly saved Genesis's. That's why we are here today, for Genesis. I offer my condolences. I know firsthand the grief of losing someone dear. None of that impacted my treatment because when I'm at work, I have my doctor brain on, as I like to put it.
Now,
And
Dr.
I
Kwan,
only focus on the life of my patient, never
Dr. Kwan,
politics.
directing you back to my question, you hope that the outcome of this case will specifically convince the legislators to place an outright ban on chemical pesticides, right?
Do I hope that? Yes. However, I only thought about that after the fact, not
you
during
are-
my.
But you thought that before coming to court to testify today, correct?
I mean, it would save many lives. So yes.
Now, Dr. Kwan, let's talk about some of your conclusions in today's case. Now, on direct examination, you referenced a chart about blood alcohol concentration, right?
Correct.
You'd recognize that if I showed it to you again, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to share Exhibit 23 with the witness?
May-
Excuse me, Your Honor, the document is not coming up at the moment. Let's see. Dr. Kwan, can you see Exhibit 23 on the left? Your Honor, I apologize for Exhibit 24 being partially shown, but constructively, could that not be part of?
Yes, that's fine.
Now, Dr. Kwan, I'd like to direct your attention to section 0.26 to 0.35 severe impairment, right? That is what that section says, correct?
Correct.
And under that, it says that one of the symptoms an individual can experience is incontinence of urine and feces, correct?
Correct.
That is symptoms essentially means the individual can't use their regular functions, right? Like using the restroom.
Correct.
Now, Dr. Kwan, permission to retrieve the exhibit, Your Honor?
You may retrieve it.
Now, Dr. Kwan, in your report, you talked about the different symptoms that could be experienced with alcohol poisoning, right?
Correct.
And you said that incontinence is not one of those, right?
I mean, it depends on which level of alcohol poisoning.
Right, but incontinence, in your words, was not a symptom of alcohol poisoning.
Can you rephrase your question?
Dr. Kwan, in your report, you said alcohol poisoning does not have incontinence as a symptom, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Objection to hearsay.
Please explain.
Yes, Your Honor. Regarding hearsay, specifically the case of America's Best Cookie versus International House of Waffles in 2011, it states that the definition of hearsay includes out-of-court statements by a witness, even if they're on the stand, and this witness is being asked about questions that were made outside of court.
Okay, defense, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we're not offering these statements for their truth that incontinence is or is not a symptom, but merely that there is a contradiction between the witness's report and what she relied upon to form her conclusions. And additionally, Your Honor, in today's case, this is an expert witness. And as an expert witness, she is allowed to rely upon outside testimony that would be otherwise inadmissible under the case law of tarot readers in the fact pattern, Your Honor.
Okay, for my benefit, would you tell me what the statement is you're listing?
Yes, Your Honor. Essentially, within this witness's report, she said that incontinence is not a symptom of alcohol poisoning. However, on Exhibit 23, which this witness relied upon, it clearly states under the section of BAC of 0.26 to 0.35 that incontinence of urine and feces is a symptom of alcohol poisoning. So this is a contradiction between her statement and essentially the facts that she used to form her conclusions.
Okay, overruled.
Now, Dr. Kwan, directing you back to my question, in your report, you said incontinence is not a symptom of alcohol poisoning, right?
I don't recall where I said that. It can be depending on the level of alcohol ingested.
So you disagree in part with Exhibit 23, right?
No, I do not disagree with the Exhibit 23, the chart, no.
So it is true incontinence can be a symptom of alcohol poisoning.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Kwan, I'd like to ask you about one more thing. Now, you weren't there at the rehearsal dinner on the night of June 7th, right?
No, that's not I did not have personal relations. I was the physician.
So you don't know exactly what Genesis ate that night, correct?
No, that's not in my scope of knowledge.
You don't know what Genesis drank?
I can speculate given the fact that I did test the stomach contents following the event itself.
You didn't see what Genesis drank that night.
Technically, yes. It depends on how you would phrase this question. I did not see Genesis specifically drink. However, I did see what Genesis drank, given the fact that I could see the stomach contents.
You don't know what surfaces Genesis came in contact with, do you?
Once again, this is a hard question to answer. Did I see what he touched that evening? No. Can science give me...
Dr. Kwan, directing you back to my line of questioning here. Essentially, you don't know what was in Genesis' system until you examined his stomach contents, right?
Correct.
By the point you examined the stomach contents, you essentially found that the stomach acid had gone so far with the contents that it was impossible to determine if the phosphate came from food or wine, right?
I disagree with that. I think it could definitely be speculated that it came from the wine and not the food because the food had been ruled out.
But Dr. Kwan, by the time you examined the stomach contents, any food that was in there was so churned and mixed in with the wine, it was impossible for you to separate the two, right?
Not completely impossible, no.
But you couldn't determine any conclusion about their separability, could you?
I reported that I did conclude from my expertise as a medical professional for the past numerous years that the organophosphates came from the wine.
Dr. Kwan, just directing you back to my question, you couldn't separate the food from the wine and Genesis' stomach contents, could you?
I believe I could, and it came from the wine.
Dr. Kwan, you were unsure, right?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think we're running on time.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes, you may be heard briefly, but it looks like we are running out of time. Go ahead.
I would just ask the witness answer my question of if she was unsure about the separation of the content.
First of all, in the report,
Sure.
report of pronouns earlier this evening, it listed that my pronouns are he, him, and I kindly ask you to respect that on the stand.
Your Honor, I've referred to Dr. Kwan as Dr. Kwan exclusively throughout this
No,
exam.
you have said she, her multiple times.
Okay. I think you asked that question a couple of times at the end, and I think we did get an answer. So I think we're just going to move on at this point, and conclude
Your Honor,
this cross-examination.
Your Honor, just for clarity, throughout this examination, I referred exclusively to this witness as Dr. Kwan without reference to gender. And I just want to make that clear because there has been clear guidance by the organization about the appropriateness of pronouns. And I just want to make that clear today.
All right.
I mean, it's recorded, so you can go back and see that you didn't, but okay.
I'd like to move on from this.
Yes, Your Honor, I have
do we have do we have a redirect examination, provided that there's any time for one?
Yes, briefly. Davis, could you please display Exhibit 5? Your Honor, Exhibit 6 is the toxicology screening. It's already been pre-admitted. If there's no objection, I just have a quick question regarding it.
Do you need me to display it for you?
Davis Humrick, are you here?
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought you were referencing my last name. I apologize.
A similar name. No problem. No problem.
If opposing counsel would like to display it, we're very grateful for that.
I don't have it pulled up.
So in that case, give me a moment. I have it.
And so while we're getting that ready, Dr. Kwan, were the tests that you performed sufficient to form a conclusion, or did you need to see what Genesis drank earlier that day?
I did not need to see physically him consume anything to know what was consumed and to have a medical conclusion on such.
Now, could you please look towards the bottom of this document, the second dash? Thank you for that, Davis. Where it says "in an attempt." Could you read that last?
Yes, in an attempt to isolate the poison source, various samples from the stomach contents were tested. No samples that appeared to be food remnants contained organophosphate compounds. Like I was trying to mention, I was able to perform the test to differentiate the food from the wine, and the wine is what contained the organophosphate compounds.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Nothing further.
Okay. Plaintiff, would you like to rest your case in chief now?
Yes, Your Honor. We will rest our case.
Okay. And do you guys, I assume people are going to want to break. How long should we break for? I'm open to suggestions.
Your Honor, we would be open to anywhere from a 5 to 10 minute break based off the plaintiff's preference.
Plaintiff?
Whichever you decide, Your Honor. 5 to 10 minutes is fine.
Okay, let's do 8 minutes, and by my count, get back here at 2. Well, this is Chicago time. All right, let's say 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Come back in 8 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.
I don't know what minute we are on, but when everybody's ready to go, we'll just get started again.
And Kristen, I'm back as well.
Okay, great, great.
Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, plaintiff, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. Defense, go ahead and call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand. Permission to proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Mr. Lewis, before we begin, can you see and hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Please introduce yourself for the record of the court.
Hello, my name is Austin Lewis.
Mr. Lewis, what do you do for a living?
I oversee day-to-day operations at Peonia Estates, the harvesting and wine production there.
What is your connection to today's case?
Yes, so I was overseeing the production of wine at the time that the events in this case occurred.
Now, before we talk about the events leading up to June 8th, 2019 and all that happened, could you tell the members of the jury a little bit about how you got into the winemaking industry?
Yeah, so my introduction to the winemaking industry, it's actually kind of hard to pin down. I've grown up around winemaking. My mother, in fact, worked for another local winery, but my first official job in the business was back in 2012. I took a job with the Cumberland Farms winery.
Mr. Lewis, when did you end up starting to work for Peonia Estates at your current job?
Yes, so I met Harper Martini in 2015, and from there we decided to go in together as business partners. We began working. He purchased the property where Peonia is now located, and I was given an ownership interest in the company.
What did your role as the wine process manager entail at Peonia Estates?
Yeah, so as the wine process manager, I was involved directly with each step of the wine production process, selecting the grapes that we would grow, and then, overseeing their cultivation. We would harvest the grapes and then prepare them for the winemaking process. Extract the juice, select which batches were going to be aged for what amount of time, and of course also the design for each wine vintage.
Now, specifically, how would Peonia Estates go about producing their wine when they bottled it?
Yes, so of course, we had several priorities when we were producing our wines. Of course, quality and safety as well. So we would always make sure to properly train our employees on the handling and proper procedure with both our winemaking tools and our growing implements, and even including things like our pesticide usage.
Now, you mentioned something about pesticides. How would Peonia Estates go about using their pesticides within the winemaking process?
So Peonia Estates is located near a pretty large swamp. So from day one at Peonia, we've had a pretty large issue with different pests trying to make their home on the property and in the vineyard itself. And so we have over time used pesticides to try and limit this problem as much as possible, while still maintaining a safe operating procedure.
What steps would the vineyard employ to make sure that you were handling the pesticide properly?
Yeah. So because of the layout of Peonia Estates, we grow our wines on a long slope. which means that some of our lower quality grapes, some of our more affordable wine options are found in the lower portion of the slope. And my concern when we began using pesticides was that some of these areas may be exposed to a higher concentration of pesticide. And so my procedure here has just been to, remove any grapes, cull any grapes that I believe have been exposed to possibly unsafe levels of pesticide. In addition to that, we go through a pretty in-depth cleaning process. We try and ensure that there's no contact between our pesticide and the finished product, which is the wine.
Now, Mr. Lewis, what was the specific practice of your company whenever you worked with spraying pesticide inside near your equipment?
Yes, so whenever we would treat the interior of our winemaking buildings, we would always move the materials out of the building and make sure that there was no possibility of contamination in that way. We would also let the area rest after we had sprayed pesticide for even up to a few days, just to ensure once again that there was no exposure.
Now, were those the same practices that were applied to the wine that was produced in the months prior to June 8th, 2019?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, that was our prerogative, and so that was what we continued to do in 2019.
Now, why would you go through all the trouble of using these very extensive practices when handling your pesticide?
Well, this actually is partially one of my main focuses with the work that I do with Peony. I'm very passionate about the quality of the product that we create here, and so my focus from day one has been to ensure that there is, virtually no chance that we are producing a subpar product or an unsafe product.
Now, during the 2019 growing season, to the best of your knowledge, did you hear if there were any issues with production that year?
No.
Mr. Lewis, could you expand on that a little bit? And to the best of your knowledge during the growing season, were there any issues with pesticide at your company?
To the best of my knowledge, we did not have any issues at that time.
Well, in the days leading up to June 8th, 2019, did Peony Estates ever use any pesticide?
Yes, so leading up to June 8th, I believe you're referring to the wedding party. Our priority was to maintain a clean and also safe environment for the wedding to occur. And so our practice was to spray our pesticides, but then at the same time provide enough time, a period of 2 to 3 days to allow that area to rest before we prepared it for guests.
And was that what happened before the wedding took place?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Mr. Lewis, do you have any idea how Genesis Petrillo could have ended up consuming any pesticide from Peony Estates?
To the best of my knowledge, I can't say. I really have no idea how this could have happened. It is a very unfortunate circumstance.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, do we have a cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Lewis. Your family worked at Cumberland's Farm Winery, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also worked at Rosie and Pedro Winery, correct?
Yes.
And currently you work at Peony Estates.
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, you own a part in the company Peony Estates.
Yes, that is correct.
So you'd say you are very experienced at winemaking.
Yes.
And part of that means that you're knowledgeable on all the rules and federal regulations that come with the winemaking business?
Yes, and unfortunately, the regulations are another aspect of the business that I am familiar with.
And your job at Peony Estates is to manage the employees.
Yes.
And one of your main responsibilities is to oversee all pesticide spraying.
Yes, I do oversee the use of pesticides.
So you allowed your employees to improperly store pesticides on at least 3 occasions?
I actually have taken it as a personal responsibility to train my employees in the proper use of pesticides. As I've said before, this was a concern of mine in terms of the quality and the safety of the wine. And so when we initially started using pesticides at Peony in 2016 or 17, I made sure that I went through with our employees and gave them a proper training on the use and storage of the pesticides, and that is.
My apologies. Please continue.
Oh no, you're good.
You were cited for improper storage of pesticides in November 2015, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And again in mid-July of 2018?
Yes, and
again in May 2019?
Yes, that is correct. And the issue that was involved in those instances has actually been resolved. The problem was the location of our storage shed, and so in response to that, Peony actually installed a brand new storage shed that was well within the federal standards.
You had a disagreement with Ms. Martini concerning the reteaching of proper protocols, correct?
Yes, so from the beginning, Martini and I have worked together as partners. However, Martini's focus has always been the business aspect of things. I've been more closely involved in the art, the process of the wine industry itself.
But you came to the conclusion not to retrain your employees on proper pesticide storage procedures, correct?
Yes, so due to the long-term employment nature of our staff, we decided that posting signs, just reminding employees of the safety procedures would be an acceptable solution.
I'm sorry, I don't think I quite got an answer there. So the two of you came to the conclusion that you did not need to retrain your employees after the 3 violations, the 3 inspections with violations, correct?
Yes, so at first, my priority being the safety and quality of our product, I was concerned about potentially the need to retrain our employees. But after seeing the way that we have responded to our citations, I believe that we moved forward correctly.
Just to move on for time's sake, an employee got very sick and almost died in 2018 from a contaminated glass of wine.
Objection, Your Honor, to character evidence, if I may be heard.
You may be heard.
Your Honor, this evidence will be offered to show the character of Peony Estates in the past in the 2018 growing season, and will be propensity evidence to show that a violation of someone being injured in 2019 also occurred.
Okay, and what's your response, Ms. Miller?
This is not going to show that it's in accordance to trade, rather to show that it had been warned and acknowledged, and despite being given the opportunity to fix the issue, they chose not to. So it's not to show a pattern or anything, it's just to show the past to lay foundation.
Okay, Mr. Davis, what's your response to that?
Yes, Your Honor, if this evidence is not being offered to show a character trait or some sort of habit on the part of the company, this would be offered to show one specific instance where an event occurred, and therefore it would be more likely that same specific instance, essentially Genesis Petrillo being poisoned, would occur, which would be propensity evidence, Your Honor.
Okay, the objection is overruled. The evidence can be introduced for the limited purpose, Ms. Miller, of showing notice and failure to, fix the issue. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. So going back to that question, in late 2018, a Peony Estates employee drank contaminated wine.
Yes, so this...
And the wine got contaminated with pesticide, correct?
Yes, so...
And the employee got so sick they almost died.
Yes. The situation as it occurred was that a glass of wine was left out near the fields by an employee. And so unfortunately, when the pesticides were sprayed, that glass of wine individually was contaminated.
You were not present during this when this incident occurred, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You testified earlier that you personally oversaw all pesticide spraying.
I'm sorry, I personally oversaw the training for our employees.
Let's move on to the type of pesticide you use. Previously, it was an organic pesticide, correct?
Yes, yeah, when we started business, we used an organic pesticide.
But currently, Peony Estates is using a chemical pesticide.
Yes, unfortunately, the organic pesticide proved largely ineffective against just the sheer number of pests that we were dealing with. However, the levels of pesticide which we use on a regular basis are deemed safe and acceptable. And so that was comforting for me.
Another reason was because Peony Estates was hemorrhaging money, correct?
Yes, so one of Harper's concerns was the need to find a more affordable solution. However, we had also determined that the organic pesticide was less effective, less efficient compared to the non-organic option.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that the witness be allowed to step down.
Okay, thank you. Witness, you may step down, and defense, you may call your second witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Cannon to the stand. Dr. Cannon, permission to proceed. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Dr. Cannon, before I begin, I just want to make sure you can hear me and see me clearly.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Would you please state your name for the court?
My name is Dr. Rachel Cannon.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a medical doctor with experience in both toxicology and pharmacology.
Why are you here in court today, Dr. Cannon?
I'm here because I was hired by Harper Martini's attorneys on April 2nd, 2020, to assess the results and work of Dr. Jameen Kwan, specifically with regards to the cause of death of Genesis Petrillo.
Now, before we talk about Petrillo, I'd like to ask you about your experience. Could you tell the members of the jury about your educational background?
I received my bachelor's of chemistry in 1990 from The Ohio State University and furthered my education by receiving my medical doctorate with an emphasis in toxicology from Harvard Medical School in 1996.
And in addition to your educational background, could you also tell the members of the jury about your work experience?
Sure. I was hired at the Massachusetts General Hospital as a chief toxicologist during my time in Boston. I worked there for 10 years, and I moved to take the faculty position at the Midlands Medical School. I taught there from 2005 to 2014. After that, I left to become an associate consultant with Gardner Consulting.
Have you ever been published, Dr. Cannon?
Yes, I've actually been published in over 50 articles on various topics, ranging from treatment of patients, various types of medication, and toxicology.
And Dr. Cannon, have you ever testified as an expert in trial before?
During my time at Gardner Consulting, I have testified in over 35 legal cases.
All right, let's shift our focus for a minute. What is the purpose of your testimony today?
I was hired by the defense counsel to review the conclusions of Dr. Kwan, and I formed my conclusions as to the likelihood of the causes of Genesis's death.
And in forming those conclusions in today's case, what, if any, methods did you use?
I applied the basic analytical toxicology method to review the conclusions that Dr. Kwan came to.
And are the methods you use generally relied upon within your field?
Yes, they are.
Are those methods reliable?
Yes, the methods are reliable.
And did you have sufficient facts and data to conduct your investigation in today's case?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to take that to apply those methods to form conclusions in today's case as well?
Yes, I was able to use these methods to come to a conclusion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty within my field.
Now, Dr. Cannon, let's talk about some of those conclusions you talked about. Did your conclusions differ from those of Dr. Kwan?
Yes, they did. I disagree with the conclusions of Dr. Kwan that organophosphate pesticide in the bottle of wine necessarily caused the death of Genesis Petrillo.
And how did you come to this disagreement?
During Dr. Kwan's examination of Genesis, there were several key possibilities that were overlooked. Specifically, Genesis Petrillo's blood alcohol content, the unknown medical conditions Petrillo may have had due to infrequent checkups, and the possibility of a different source of organophosphate pesticide.
Now, what other aspects of your examination of Dr. Kwan's reports and his conclusions led you to believe that organophosphate pesticide was not the only way that Genesis Petrillo could have died that night?
Petrillo did not have regular checkups, and there are several unaccounted variables that could have caused the death that night. In fact, he did not have blood work done for 3 years prior to the wedding. Individuals can often develop allergies and medical complications later in life. Additionally, to my understanding, the empty bottle of wine that Petrillo consumed that night was later tested positive for isophos organophosphate pesticide, but no test can conclude to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that it was in the bottle of wine that night.
Now, is it possible to conclude to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that organophosphate pesticide was in the wine that Petrillo consumed that night?
It is impossible to conclude to a degree of scientific certainty that organophosphate pesticide was present in the wine that Genesis Petrillo consumed that night.
Now, what evidence, if any, did Dr. Kwan provide in his report that suggested this was the only possible cause of death?
The only evidence found in Dr. Kwan's report to suggest that the presence of the wine and the organophosphate pesticide in Petrillo's stomach was at the same time. This is not conclusive, as these substances could have entered Petrillo's body at separate times during the night.
Now, what could have caused this organophosphate pesticide poisoning that led to Petrillo's unfortunate death?
There could have been several things. First, having dealt with several pesticide poisoning cases, these pesticides are commonly used in produce farming and often found in unwashed produce and fruits. Ingestion of these unwashed vegetables and fruits could explain the presence of organophosphate pesticide in Petrillo's stomach.
Now, is it possible that something other than the Cara wine was consumed that night that could have contained this organophosphate pesticide?
Yes, that is possible. Through Dr. Kwan's testing and analysis, it is impossible to conclude to a degree of scientific certainty that organophosphate pesticide was present in the wine consumed by Genesis Petrillo that night. There are too many alternative explanations that were not explored in his original report, such as the possibility of an outside source of organophosphate pesticide that Dr. Kwan failed to account for.
Now, finally, what was the final conclusion you came to after assessing the report of Dr. Kwan and his conclusions?
My final conclusion was that there are far too many variables and flaws in the theory that the bottle of Cara wine given to Genesis Petrillo by Harper Martini contained organophosphate pesticide, and that this pesticide was the cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. It is impossible to conclude to any degree of scientific certainty that the conclusion of Dr. Kwan was accurate.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions.
Okay, great. Cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Dr. Cannon, you didn't speak with anyone else involved in this case outside of the people who hired you, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't do any examination outside of the documents you read, correct?
Correct.
They paid you $50,000 to do that, correct?
Yes, that's the normal fee for the consulting.
So just so I'm clear, the defense paid you $50,000 without examining the body nor talking to anyone? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, on direct, you stated you disagreed with Dr. Kwan's conclusions and you provided multiple theories, correct?
Yes.
But you agree that the facts are most consistent with Genesis' death resulting from consuming poisonous wine, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, regarding alcohol poisoning, Dr. Cannon, you've never seen a fatality with anything less than 0.30% BAC, have you?
No, I have not.
And Genesis' blood alcohol level was 0.16, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you have no evidence that Genesis' blood alcohol level was anywhere near that 0.30%, correct?
Correct.
You agree that, and the truth is that it's highly unlikely Genesis died from alcohol poisoning, correct?
That is correct.
Now, even if alcohol poisoning was a possibility, that doesn't explain why Genesis blood screening showed that he ingested poison, correct?
Yes.
It doesn't explain the constricted pupils, does it?
No, it does not.
It doesn't explain Petrio's extremely low oxidolase levels, correct?
Correct.
You agree those low levels are a direct indication of organophosphate poisoning, correct?
Yes, they are.
So you agree it's more likely Petrio died because of the pesticide and not because of alcohol poisoning, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, regarding allergic reaction, you agree that Petrio had no history of any allergies, correct?
He did not, but he had not been to the doctor in 3 years.
And so there was no record of any allergies, correct?
No, there was not any record.
But you agree if he was having an allergic reaction, he would have shown some type of visible rash, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
But Genesis didn't show any visible rashes, did he?
No, he did not.
And even if he did have an allergic reaction, it still doesn't explain why the blood work shows pesticide poison, does it?
No, it does not.
Now, you agree you saw no evidence that an allergy caused Petrio's death. Isn't that true?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, regarding the hepatic disease, Petrio's medical records show that he did not have hepatic disease, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You agree this disease is the least likely of all the alternatives that you provided, correct?
Yes.
Now, in terms of another vehicle, alternative vehicle, you stated it's a possibility Petrio consumed something else that was laced with the pesticide, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You are aware that all the leftover food and wine was tested at Peonia Estates, correct?
Yes, I am aware.
You're aware not one of those items tested positive for the pesticide, correct?
Yes.
You agree if he ate food that was filled with poison, the other people who ate that same food would also be sick, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you got an opportunity to review Exhibit 6, the poison analysis, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you're aware the Petrio's stomach only contained food and wine, correct?
Yes.
You're aware the food didn't have any pesticide in it, correct?
Yes, I am aware.
You're aware the analysis of the stomach only identified the wine, correct?
Yes.
You agree that your evidence compelled you to believe the wine is what contained the pesticide, correct?
Yes.
And you agree ingesting this pesticide is the most likely cause for Genesis respiratory arrest. Isn't that true?
Yes, that is correct.
You agree the wine produced by the defendant is the most likely cause of the pesticide poisoning, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, Dr. Cannon, doesn't that mean that you agree with the conclusion of Dr. Kwan?
It does seem to look to, yes, it does. I do agree, but at the same time, not all of the variables are able to be examined.
Okay. But you believe that it's more likely that Dr. Kwan's conclusion is correct, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Okay, any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, just to clarify, you could not conclude to any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Dr. Kwan's conclusions were correct.
That is correct.
Nothing further.
Okay, moving on to the third defense witness.
Yes, Your Honor. I see that my camera is frozen. I will try to fix that.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor, or would you prefer that I wait for my camera to unfreeze?
Has it frozen before? Do we have an idea? Let's just go, and if you can try to correct it as we're going. There you go. I can see you now. Good. Go.
The plaintiff now calls Miss Casey Soto to the stand. Good morning, Miss Soto. Before we proceed, can you hear and see me?
Unfortunately.
Please state your name for the court.
Casey.
Please state your last name for the court.
Soto.
Why are you in court today, Miss Soto?
Why am I here? Why am I here? That's a great question. Why am I here?
Redirecting you back to my question, why are you here in court today?
Because you subpoenaed me. The cops showed up at my house with that subpoena, and now I'm here. I wanted privacy, but I know that may be a difficult concept for you to understand.
When did you meet Genesis Petrillo?
Leave me alone already.
Redirecting you back to my question, when did you meet Genesis Petrillo?
Bless your heart.
Your Honor, can you please direct Ms. Soto to answer my question?
Ms. Soto, please answer the attorney's questions.
Redirecting you back to my question, when did you meet Genesis Petrillo?
No, we aren't doing this.
Your Honor, permission to treat Ms. Soto as a hostile witness and ask leading questions.
Sure.
You met Genesis in 2012, correct?
Are questions about my deceased fiance really necessary?
Redirecting you back to my question, you met Genesis in 2012, is that correct?
Yeah, I met him through a friend.
And Genesis proposed to you on July 18th of 2018, correct?
He did. He beat me to it.
And you and Genesis eventually agreed to have your wedding at Peony Estates.
Yeah, we did.
Now let's talk about Peony Estates. You were aware of a recent inspection there, correct?
My mama mentioned it.
And afterwards you saw signs go up in the winery, is that right?
Yeah.
Signs instructing hand washing for cleanliness purposes, isn't that right?
Yeah, I saw them.
Now, I would like to direct your attention to the rehearsal dinner. Harper toasted Genesis, correct?
Yeah, she did.
And you believed it was genuine, didn't you?
I was convinced.
And Harper gave the bottle to Genesis.
Yeah, she gave him the bottle.
But you did not see the bottle before it was presented.
No, I was too busy enjoying my rehearsal party.
You do not know what went into the bottle of wine.
No idea.
You don't know if anything got into that wine.
As I said, I was enjoying my rehearsal dinner.
So you wouldn't know if pesticides went into that bottle.
No idea.
For all you know, this was just a normal bottle of wine.
I was given no reason to believe otherwise.
And you also do not know what was around the bottle when the wine was being poured into it, correct?
Couldn't tell you.
Now, the next couple of questions are going to be difficult, but I'm going to need you to answer them. You discovered Genesis was missing, correct?
Yeah, I discovered my own fiance was missing.
And you found out that Genesis was in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
And you rushed to the hospital.
Yeah.
You did everything you could to find him.
I did everything. I searched everywhere.
But Genesis already passed when you got there, is that right?
I was 5 minutes too late. He was gone.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. Do you need a moment, Ms. Soto?
No, let's get this over with.
How are you today, Ms. Soto?
How do you think?
Stand. Your Honor, permission to continue treating the witness as a hostile witness.
For what purpose?
She clearly displayed symptoms of hostility during the direct. I'm anticipating that she's going to continue those during cross.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to ask leading questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go on.
Now, Ms. Soto, you stated on your direct that you had no reason to believe that it was pesticide that had poisoned that wine.
Right.
When you heard about what had happened, did you think at all that Peony Estates might have been involved?
What do you mean?
When you had heard that pesticide was involved, did you think of Peony Estates maybe being involved in that poisoning?
The first thing I thought was the fact that my fiance was dead. So no, the first thought wasn't maybe Peony Estates killed my husband.
Is it, Let me re-ask the question, ma'am. When you had heard of pesticide, you did think of Peony Estates.
Sure.
Going back to before the wedding, Ms. Soto, Harper had told you some concerning information about pesticide storage.
She mentioned it. Yes.
And you had also had experience volunteering at Peony Estates.
Yeah, my mama owns it, so I'm very familiar with Peony Estates.
You have a very general sense of how the affairs at Peony Estates are conducted.
Very general. My mama wanted me to take it over one day, but I had different plans with my fiance, who's dead.
Now, it's true that at Peony Estates, pesticides are normally stored in the storage barn.
Yes.
And Harper had disclosed to you that there had been a leak at that storage barn.
Yes, she mentioned it.
In fact, you thought that it sounded dangerous.
Okay.
Just to clarify, that's the yes to my question. You thought it was dangerous.
Oh, that was a question. Sorry, I didn't know how it was phrased. Sure.
In fact, you suggested that we postpone the wedding.
I mean, I thought that maybe we needed to postpone the wedding, but I wasn't sure that we didn't need to, so I didn't think about it.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be able to step down.
Okay, Ms. Soto, you are excused. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the defense rests its case in chief. We would just ask, as long as it's okay with opposing counsel, that we take a brief recess before closing arguments.
Okay. I don't know when all, sorry, I just heard myself. I don't know when all off is. Can we take 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What sounds good?
All losses 4:59, if that helps.
Okay.
The defense is fine with the 3-minute break just to collect our notes and get all the exhibits lined up.
Okay, let's take a 3-minute break. Okay, I think it's been 5 minutes or so. Erica, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and do we have our plaintiff closer?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, are you ready to go?
Yes, 1 second. Just getting organized. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead when you're.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court? Your Honor, members of the jury, cutting costs leads to lives lost. Members of the jury, you hear all the time about companies cutting costs to increase profits, only for those profits to be earned at the expense of their very own customers. And time again, these same companies get a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, an entire family ends up being totally destroyed, dismembered, and dismantled. And that's exactly what the defense is trying to do here today. But ladies and gentlemen, we won't try to poke holes in the story nor massage the facts like the defense has tried to do today, because the facts alone are on our side. And the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that Genesis Petrillo went to his rehearsal dinner, a dinner planned for him and his fiance, only to fall victim of the careless and reckless business practices of the same family he was just about to marry into. Now think about what you learned today. You learned that Peonia Estates cut costs on adequate pesticide training for their employees. They cut costs and sacrificed proper storage of those pesticides. They cut costs and sacrificed proper usage of those pesticides. And by cutting these measly costs just to gain a few dollars, a life was lost, members of the jury. Now, before we go into the actions of the defendant, I just want to take a brief moment to remember the life that was lost. Genesis Petrillo, a young life at that, members of the jury, 27 years of age. Genesis was a supportive and loving fiance to Miss Casey Soto. He was a friend who had his whole life in front of him. He graduated from graduate school in May of 2018, where he received his PhD, on to make a difference in the world. But not anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Genesis will never get the chance to fulfill his true potential. He'll never get the chance to have a family with Casey. Nothing. On June 7, 2019, Genesis Petrillo took his last sip of wine, and then he took his last breath. He needlessly died, which left his fiancée, Casey Soto, all alone. Casey went overnight from planning a wedding to planning a funeral. Genesis arrived at his rehearsal dinner. He drank wine and he celebrated. But what Genesis did not know is that Peonia Estates was going under. That's why Harper wanted to have the wedding at Peonia Estates in an attempt to revive her drowning business. More importantly, Genesis had no idea about the dangerous manner in which they were growing and preparing the wine. But how would he know that the defendant's careless actions of cutting costs was just about to lead to his life being lost? The answer to that question is he wouldn't. He wouldn't. It wasn't his job. But you know whose job it was to protect their customers and people like Genesis and to follow the rules? It was the defendant's job. Peonia Estates, it was their job, a job they simply failed to do. Now, members of the jury, as the plaintiff in today's case, we are pursuing the claim of negligence per se, which simply means that we had to prove that Peonia Estates violated the statute. And if it wasn't for that, Genesis would still be here today. We have to prove our case by a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means our job is only to prove that more likely than not, just a tiny bit more, that the defendant is liable. And we did that today by proving 4 things took place. The defendant violated the pesticide statute, which was a safety statute, and the defendant's actions caused the harm, and plaintiff is a member of the protected class. Now, as my co-counsel told you during the opening, numbers 2 and 4 are already understood. And so we are only here to prove numbers 1 and 3, that it's more likely than not the defendant violated the statute and the defendant's actions caused harm. And members of the jury, we met and surpassed that burden today. And here's why. When you ask the question, is it more likely than not the defendant violated the statute? Well, you heard today from Inspector Riley O'Keefe that on November 5th, July 12th, and May 8th, she conducted inspections, and her inspections revealed Peonia Estates was misusing and improperly storing pesticides. She even tested the wine on July 12th, and it was positive for the presence of the very same pesticide that killed Genesis Petrillo. More likely than not. She gave them multiple chances to follow the rules, and it got to the point where she had to give them 45 days before they had to close their doors for good. The fact alone that the only official inspector that inspected Peonia Estates stated that out of the 3 visits, all 3 reported they did not follow the pesticide rules. And Inspector O'Keefe even saw them storing pesticides in the same room they bottled the wine. It's more likely than not they violated the statute, members of the jury. The defense witness, Austin Lewis, came before you today and stated they fixed any problems regarding pesticide storage. That wasn't true. If it was, Genesis would still be here today. They stated the pesticide levels were low enough to where they didn't break the rules. Austin Lewis isn't a doctor. You learned from a real doctor today, Dr. Kwan, who stated the slightest ingestion of this pesticide is deadly. Austin Lewis isn't an inspector. Inspector O'Keefe from the FDA told you they broke the rules. Instead of correcting their mistakes, they continued business as usual. And by failing to remove the pesticides from the wine bottling rooms, the wine, of course, became exposed to the pesticide. This was the wine bottling room, members of the jury. Lonnie Paris and Riley O'Keefe told you they saw pesticides in the same room Peonia Estates used to bottle their wine, which is the same room they held and stored the Carroll wine bottle, which is the same wine that killed Genesis Petrillo. And these careless oversights and missteps are, in fact, what led to the death of Genesis Petrillo. The defense's own witness, Dr. Cannon, took the stand on direct examination just to contradict everything she said on cross-examination. She got up here and told you that it is more likely that Genesis died from being poisoned by this pesticide, more likely than all of those other alternatives and theories she tried to fool you with. All they had to do was follow the directions. All they had to do was keep pesticides away from wine production. A simple task, yet a task they refused to do. Even Peonia Estates believed it was more likely than not the entire Cara wine collection was contaminated. Why else would a failing company throw out their entire product? They knew it was likely. They knew it was likely when they were reprimanded for breaking the rules on November 5th. They knew it was likely when they were reprimanded for breaking the rules on July 12th and again on May 8th. They knew it was likely when they almost got shut down and placed on probation and was only given 45 days to remain open for this very same reason. You would think they learned their lesson when one of their own employees almost died because of this very same thing. They had an employee almost die on the job for drinking poisonous wine that was contaminated with the very same pesticide that killed Genesis Petrillo. Do you think this was a wake-up call for Peonia Estates? It wasn't. They were more worried about cutting costs than lives lost. When is it enough, members of the jury? When are we going to take a stand and say enough? Imagine if your water company decided that pesticide-filled water was too expensive to filter, and they just decided to bottle the water up and sold it. There are rules and laws against these practices, members of the jury, and Midland's Code 12-100 states proper precautions and restrictions must be in place to protect customers from ingesting poisonous items. But Peonia Estates, they don't follow the rules. The only thing they follow is the money. But that stops here today, ladies and gentlemen. No more lives lost due to cutting costs. So now you have to ask yourself, if Peonia Estates would have followed the rules, is it more likely that Genesis would still be alive? The answer to that question is yes, members of the jury. And therefore, we ask you to find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Okay. Defense closer, are you ready to close?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
Yes, you have.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. This case is a tragic accident. Whether we forget to send an email in the morning to our boss, we accidentally spill our coffee on the way out the door, we miss a green light turning from red to green because we're looking at our phone, accidents happen every day. And unfortunately, accidents can sometimes have fatal consequences. And on June 8th, 2019, Genesis Petrillo passed away. And in today's case, this was a tragedy that was unforeseeable, and no one knows exactly why it happened. At the beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel, Randall Shirey, came before you, and he told you to be on the lookout for 3 things as the various witnesses were called before you. First, he told you to listen as Austin Lewis, the head production manager of Peonia Estates. And he told you to listen as Austin outlined all the different procedures and practices Peonia Estates put in place to make sure they handled the pesticide properly. Next, he told you to listen as Dr. Cannon took the stand. And as Dr. Cannon told you that it's impossible to conclude to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the organophosphate poisoning came from the wine that Genesis Petrillo drank. And finally, you heard from Casey Soto, the lady that was supposed to marry Genesis Petrillo. Unfortunately, she lost Genesis. But remember what she said on the stand today about how she never saw what went into the bottle of wine. She doesn't know what happened to bring it there. Members of the jury, that's what we heard a lot of in today's case. Now, before we go through everything that happened in this trial, I'd like to just lay out for you what your role is as members of the jury. Now, your role in today's case is to be the fact finders. It's your job to pull together all the pieces of evidence that have been presented and to try to make a picture of what actually happened in today's case. Now here, the plaintiff has brought a claim of negligence per se. Essentially, it's their job to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, that Peony Estates is liable for the death of Genesis Petrillo. Now, in order to do this, they must show two things. Essentially, they must show first that the company violated the statute in a specific way. And second, due to that violation, that the violation was the direct and proximate cause of Genesis's death. Now, in today's case, we, the defense, we don't have a burden. We don't have to prove anything. That burden rests solely on the plaintiff, but throughout the course of today's trial, we have presented evidence points to the fact that there wasn't a direct violation of the statute, and that because there was no violation and no one saw exactly what went into that bottle of wine, there was no foreseeable direct and proximate cause that caused the death of Genesis. Now first, let's look at the first element that's at issue in today's case. Was the statute actually even violated? Now, opposing counsel came up here and told you that Peony Estates was really concerned with cutting costs. They were doing everything they could to make a quick buck. Members of the jury, it's not what happened here. Peony Estates is not some large Wall Street company that tries to take advantage of the little guy. It's a family-owned business. It was trying to do everything they could to follow the rules. Now, you heard from Inspector O'Keefe and how whenever O'Keefe came to the winery, she saw some issues. They had a clogged drain, some pesticide that was stored about 50 yards too close to the shelter where the wine was stored. Members of the jury, think back to what she said. Did she ever tell you that there was a direct statutory violation? No. She told you that they had pesticide on their premises. You heard from Austin Lewis that that's exactly what happened. They were very careful in how they treated it to make sure they followed every aspect of the rules. The members of the jury, even though they had a clogged drain and might have had their wine too close to pesticide, that doesn't mean they violated a statute for putting pesticide into their wine. And that leads us to the second element in today's case, that the plaintiff has failed to show that the actions of Peony Estates are the direct and proximate cause of Genesis's death. Essentially, they must show to you that the defense put, or the defendant put specific pesticide into that bottle of wine, and that it was foreseeable that Genesis would have died due to their actions. Members of the jury, think back to every single witness. Inspector O'Keefe never saw the bottling process. Lonnie Perez never saw the bottling process. Dr. Kwan and Dr. Cannon, they weren't there that day. Austin Lewis and Casey Soto, none of them saw what actually went into that bottle of Cara wine. Members of the jury, as the defense, we don't have to prove that they didn't put anything into that bottle of wine. It's the plaintiff's burden to show that it was actually placed in there. Members of the jury, if you conclude that that's not the most likely outcome based off the testimony you heard today, you must find that the actions of Peony Estate were not the direct cause of Genesis's death. Specifically, you heard from Dr. Cannon how she told you that it was inconclusive that the wine that Genesis consumed that night was the actual cause, that there could have been something else that caused the death that night. Members of the jury, that's backed up by what Austin Lewis said, where the estate was very careful to make sure that their wine was of the highest quality and was safe for all of their clients. members of the jury, this case was an unforeseeable tragedy that no one could have expected. Honestly, we don't know how that wine ended up with Genesis and how Genesis ended up with organophosphate pesticide. But because we don't know, we cannot hold my client, Peonia Estates, liable for negligence per se, because it must be the most likely outcome that their actions caused the direct and proximate cause of Genesis's death. Because the plaintiff has failed to meet their burden in today's case, we ask you to do the right thing. To pull all the pieces of the evidence together and look at the picture of June 7th, 2019. And I'm confident that when you do, you will find the defendant not liable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a rebuttal from plaintiff?
I do believe that my closing ran a little bit longer. The last notation I see is less than a minute, and that was, I know I spoke for a little bit more, so I don't believe I have time.
Okay. Well, in that case, great job, guys. And should I introduce myself? What happens now? Or do you want to leave?
No, that's okay. So let's just submit ballots first. And then once
Sure.
those are in and all submitted, we can come back and do comments.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
everyone could just hang on for just, 2 minutes, and then we'll get these submitted. And once we're in, we'll give you some comments. Are you all good?
All good.
Perfect. I'll just text Scott and let him know. Okay. Where am I? Quorum 3. Okay, I think we're all set, so we can get started on comments as long as everyone would like them. Awesome. Okay, so I'll introduce myself. I was a scoring judge. My name's Erica Oates. I am a Wake Law grad, and I am formerly the coach of the Wake undergrad team. I did mock for 10 plus years and then coach. So it's really nice to be back in this realm and see you guys in action. I've definitely missed it. And I'm really glad that, we were able to do this via Zoom. And now I practice civil litigation up in Connecticut. So everyone did an excellent job. I was very impressed. This morning, the trial I saw was the opposite. It was the battery trial. And so it was really interesting to see the opposite, the negligence per se. And I do think this case is pretty even-handed in terms of the plaintiff and the defense. Just across the board, I know some of my global comments, make sure that you take your time when you speak. And this is, some are better at this than others. I know I'm a fast talker and I talk with my hands. So going through these invitational rounds, I think it's really important to kind of learn your tics And whether it be for witnesses trying to explain a concept to a non-mock person or someone who's outside the universe, that way you make sure that what you're saying logically makes sense to a layperson. Because I know, at least for me, now that I'm not, in the mock judging world really anymore, I've never read the case. And so you want to be able to explain those concepts to essentially a layperson, but who knows procedure. So that's my advice in terms of witnesses. Attorneys, make sure that you speak clearly, you enunciate, and speak slowly enough. We want to hear every word that you have to say. So don't let any get lost, because you're nervous. And I always think it's helpful, take a deep breath every single time before you start something. It's really easy to get swept up in it. And I get that. I still do it in practice. So just make sure that you do that. But I thought you guys did a great job. They were really interesting, thoughtful arguments. And it was great to watch. So.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is, does everyone hear me? Can I get a nod? Okay, great. Sorry, it's like I'm talking in a vacuum. My name is Kristen Stoichescu. I went to NIU for undergrad, did mock trial there. I went to Northwestern for law school, just graduated this year, and just took the bar. So I'm not really an attorney, but like almost there. And I too have, I think I'm going on my 11th year of mock trial, coaching and judging and, competing, all of that. Very well done. This was a good round. I'll just make some general comments. So here's what I'm expecting to hear, not being very familiar with the case. What I'm expecting to hear is, the basic negligence claim, duty, breach, causation, harm. And then negligence per se is supposed to establish the duty and the breach. And plaintiff closer, you do argue it that way, but you don't say it that way. And so it's confusing all throughout your case up until the very end what exactly is going on, because, well, okay, you can say the 4 elements of negligence per se, but that's not your full claim. You still have to establish causation and obviously the harm. So I would figure that out and try to make the law more clear. I think that's really important if you're going to do the negligence case. Generally, some attorneys had very great conversational styles, and that's really important. That's always really good. The Casey Soto thing with the hostile witness, I really didn't like it. I don't know if there's another way to do that, but I thought, I would just scrap that. I didn't think it was good for anybody, either side.
I didn't like it either.
And I didn't understand. Yeah, I didn't understand. I didn't understand anything from that witness. Nothing at all. No idea, nothing. So I would rethink that. And then the last thing I want to say is the plaintiff's first witness. I don't know if you were trying, but I found you hilarious with the disgusting. I don't know. Some judges might not like that, but I thought it was really funny. And I don't know if that was intentional, but I thought it was funny. Oh, and actually, this is the last thing I want to say. Both your cases were really meaty, so much detail, but it's not very well organized and it's not laid out in a story fashion, really. So there's a lot of assumed facts that I don't know what you're talking about, who was, what their positions are at this place and actually what happened. If you think I'm going to understand it from your opening, think again and retell the story every opportunity you can. Each of the 3 witnesses is, a third opportunity to get that story in my head. I did think, both teams kind of came together at the end and the closings were very good. So yeah, well done. And if you guys have any questions, I don't know, you can message me on LinkedIn, Google my name. So well done.
Thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Any questions for us before we go? No? All right, then you're free to go then.
All right, thank you. You guys have a great day.
Nice job, guys.
Mm-hmm.